Okay, so a couple of years ago, it was actually a year ago, there was a mad lad that basically showed up to the Mexican Congress and he was trying to convince them that aliens were real. I don't know if you guys remember or not, but there was actually a similar thing that happened last year where our Congress was looking at UAPs. Do you guys remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I remember. I think they had like some military guy in there
Yeah, yeah.
talking about that.
And there was like an Intel guy or something like that. Basically, that guy and another researcher, I think the researcher's like name is Masson, kind of linked up and they went to Mexico as well. And so this is a little snippet I'll show you guys of what they brought.
All mummified specimens were unveiled at Mexico's first ever UFO hearing yesterday. Yeah, it looks like ET. You're right. The alleged alien corpses were found in Peru. They're believed to be 700 to 1800 years old. They only had three
Here's the
fingers
best
and
part.
elongated heads. X-rays of the aliens were also shown, and experts say one of the bodies has eggs inside of it.
Ooh. So, okay. So, what you kind of saw here, it's funny, right? But also, this is a researcher, a literal researcher. He teamed up with like people who do like, you know, that like carbon dating type of stuff that they do. He teamed up with those type of researchers and basically was trying to convince Congress or the Mexican Congress, hey, look, you guys need to be the first country to recognize that aliens were a thing. So I thought this was interesting for a couple reasons. One, just because it's funny, but also because it shows the need for like scientists, mathematicians, engineers to kind of maybe engage with their Congress or their government, right? So this is one example. It's kind of an extreme example. They basically literally got in front of their government uh, and gave this to try to convince the government to define laws in a certain way that would recognize these aliens. Uh, so what I'm here to tell you guys today is basically, I think you guys should do the same thing, and I'm going to give you kind of a template for how you could actually do that. Uh, but first, before we
All
go, I want to take a
mummified
little bit
specimens were unveiled at Mexico's first
a
ever UFO
step out
hearing
that funny
yesterday.
little thing
Yeah, it looks like
here.
ET. You're right. The alleged
Okay, so before we actually get into that, you got to kind of really understand like what it is that we're seeing when we work with our government, right? So there's kind of a hidden arrow here that I forgot to put here, but like there's a big giant arrow that goes here to here that actually makes this gold. Like that's how Congress gets the gold. It's from the public, right? It's off their taxes, all that junk. I forgot that in my diagram, so please apologize or take my apologies. I'm not a political scientist. I just literally vibe and I learn shit from Wikipedia. So anyway, the basic gist, so we're all on the same page, at least for this talk, the mental model of government is Congress, it has the gold, all right? It has stuff that it can access from the Treasury. And it basically says, okay, I'm going to write some law that says this agency has this amount of this gold, right? And then your president, so our homie Joe Biden, basically said, all right, so this agency now has this, but I want it to be staffed this way, and I want it to execute using this money this way. So together, these two guys basically empower an agency to make something like a bridge, okay? Or, for instance, like, you know, let's say a scientific lab or something like that. And then this is a service that's given back to the public because the public in itself couldn't really make this bridge. I don't really think there's a single startup out there that could pitch like, hey, look, I'm going to build Golden Gate bridges. That's just not really a thing. But like, why should you really care about this? One, it's because, as scientists, engineers, we're the people who know like how these things get built. So we should really be paying attention more how this process actually works. Also, another thing is like when Congress issues this money to an agency and then the president basically shapes the agency and tells it to make something. Well, what that product is, it goes to a certain group usually, right? It doesn't just go to the public like you see here. It goes to a certain group usually. So for instance, this would be San Francisco. But if you're not from San Francisco, then you missed out on basically this opportunity. So in another way too, like you don't get the benefit of it, But if, for instance, they give a service or grant to a particular group, but not you, then your field is impacted by that. And also, let's say that it prioritizes a competitor. So let's say you make rubber roofs and someone makes shingle roofs, and then they subsidize rubber roofs. Well, that screws you over. So you should care about that. But another reason why you should care is because if you're kind of interested in this type of stuff, you usually probably want things that are cool, like Ames National Lab, or like all these cool little lab facilities that have made so many cool scientific discoveries. But also, you might care just because like aliens are cool and you want to make sure that people recognize them. So how exactly do you even like engage? So these guys got to a point where they're literally in a hearing before their Mexican Congress. That's one way you can engage. To get to that level kind of requires some pro strats. And I can't really show you that. That's like beyond the scope of this. But here's a couple of things that you can do. So first, you have to go and find like what it is that was produced. So if we go back to here, what it is here or here that determines what agencies can do. Well, you can find these on congress.gov. For instance, I'll show you when we get to the next part. You can find literal text of the bills, and I can actually answer your questions for like how you exactly filter for like which version is public law and all that stuff. And if you don't even know what that means, I didn't know what that meant until like 2-3 months ago. So you can use this to also see how like your district and your representatives voted, which is important for you because let's say that you're in the district with Ames Lab and they didn't fund something that affected Ames Lab, well then that might actually impact you as well. For executive orders, those basically shape how the different agencies will function and also some other special caveats to that. But you can find these things from what's called the Federal Register. And then, going back to what the Mexican people did when they presented talking about the aliens, that is an example of a hearing. And that's basically where, like, the House or the Senate will basically go over, like, ideas and kind of brainstorm, as well as bring witnesses to kind of hold them accountable for if the agency doesn't do their job correctly. And also, you can literally see hearings where they're going over like the specific language that goes in a bill. So they're arguing right there. So if you want to see like what the intention of a bill is, you can see these hearings. And also, a lot of times these hearings will preempt future bills. So if you hear a hearing from like these committees right here, these are really important ones if you're interested in science, math, and tech. The Senate Appropriations. And this one is, I made an oopsie right there. But Appropriation and Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committees, they're important for the Senate. And for the House, you have the House Energy and Commerce, as well as the Science, Space, and Technology Committees. You can actually subscribe to this Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and they'll send you I think it's like a weekly blast for like all the bills that they're working on. So that's a really good way to keep in mind what's going on. But another cool thing is like often these guys will like literally say where the grants are. So if you're really good at writing, then you might be able to like apply directly for a grant that would allow you to do certain research or like spin your like technology off into a small business really easily. So that's where you can find the source material that you can use to get your opinion. But how to engage is more complicated. But there are a couple of different like key tips and trips that I would recommend. So one, you can actually just schedule meetings with your representative. So you can basically, that's essentially what lobbying is. It's really all it is. So you can just call their office, which you can find online. And I'll demo it in the next thing right here. But you can call them, find their info, and then just talk. And if you're a constituent, usually they'll try to help you. Also, they usually have meet and greets that they have formally scheduled where they bring a lot of constituents together. And you can basically, subscribe to your local guy and you'll figure out when those are. So you'll not just be able to connect with them, but a lot of people who have similar interests to you. So if you're going to call, one thing to really make sure is that you let them know that you're a constituent. So give them your address so that they basically have a requirement to almost respond to you. There's some people who maybe skip this step. And what I mean by that is some representatives might skip this step if they don't think that you're a constituent. You can also send a letter, but like when they're responding to your letter, they try to use templates in order to save themselves time because a lot of people have similar opinions. So if you phrase your issue in a way that forces them to like have to uniquely respond to you, then that's a really good way to kind of get ahead. So for instance, if there's a common issue in the media, try to like phrase it in a negation of what most people do. And usually that will trip people up such that they'll accidentally write you an actual genuine letter instead of reusing a template because a lot of people are not very good at logic. So also another thing to consider is like these offices, they hate particular agencies and they love particular agencies. So for instance, if you're like a Republican, they might not like the Environment Protection Agency. So if you know that, you can use that to your advantage. If you want certain like things to be considered by mentioning like, oh, I also hate EPA, or you know, I love Department of Energy. And if you know that, then you can get them to kind of want to meet with you because it makes them look good if they could like basically throw pie on the agency's face. Because by throwing pie on the agency's face, they're making the president look bad or good, depending on if that president is their, you know, party. And another thing to consider is these representatives, they have a lot of powers, but they get special powers based off of what committees they are on, and that gives them special like legislative jurisdiction. So at this point, we can go to an example based off of what you guys want to do, but I'll kind of open the floor for you guys to basically ask me questions and I can use that to like tweak my example.
What do you mean asking questions about this one?
So like examples about anything you heard, maybe like questions about the whole idea, how you might engage, if you should engage, anything like that. And then I can basically dive in and show you information based off of that.
Okay, so like if I, give me a sec. So you're saying if like I work for a certain company and that's kind of what we're going off of?
Sure.
Okay. Like if I'm working for the outdoor rec program at Iowa State, hypothetically, of course, and I just want more funding for outdoor recreation activities.
Okay. So then basically what I might do is be like, okay, so I would look at his committees. So let's go to his place here. So this is, for instance, Randy Feenstra, who's in charge of Ames, Iowa. This is Iowa. I don't know if it's Iowa 4 or if it's Iowa 1, but regardless, we can look that up. First off, like you'd have to basically say like, okay, how am I even going to contact this guy? So usually it's pretty easy. Like they'll just leave this information here. The calling thing, you probably want to try this first and just see if they're responsive. But again, they usually work like typical 9 to 5 hours, so you want to call them during that time. But you don't want to really call them if you know there's like a big thing, like for instance the TikTok ban. If you call them during the time when the TikTok ban is happening, like they're all talking about and they're voting about that, you're probably not going to be like given the bandwidth that you need. So you'd maybe want to call this at like a good time. But anyway, so what Sawyer's talking about is you'd want to go here and basically see, where is this? Committees and caucuses. So first what you'd want to do is look and see, like, based off of his committees and caucuses, does he have anything in his like legislative power that I could use to basically support Iowa Rec? Okay, so we see rural broadband, probably not, unless we could pitch something like related to, yeah, I don't think so. Let's see. It might be a tough pitch, but if somehow this component of innovation is something, maybe we could pitch like, oh, we want to team up with like Iowa State's Innovated Iowa State to make a like a pop-up rock wall thing that we can bring around or something. And that might be a trick. But if you don't see anything here that's good, then what you might want to do is basically look through the media and basically like is op-eds and basically see if there's anything related to here. So that's an example of like ways that you could kind of get ideas. But you definitely want to like use their like messaging kind of not really against them, but to help you. That's just something to think about. It's kind of obvious when you um, like really start doing it, but it's something that I feel like if you're thinking about things in terms of I just crush calculus problems, you might not think about some of the like softer parts of life like this. Like perhaps maybe you could say like, hey, look, um, I don't know, let's see.
Is there like a long list of all these issues that you can just like click on one?
Yeah, yeah. Usually he has
All
like
the
a whole
stuff.
bunch of
Oh, I got
yeah. So then you could just basically go like that and see like if there's something related to this. But yeah, so basically what it would come down to, and what I would say is, well, one, you guys definitely want to think about engaging if you're not already. But key things that you want to think about if you want to engage effectively are like what committees they're on and their background. Because then if you know that, you can use that to your advantage to like highlight particular organizations that they would like.